And so Gog is arrogant. Gog is powerful. Gog is beautiful. And Gog does whatever he wants. So in verse 17, thus says the Lord God, are you the one of whom I spoke in former days through my servants, the prophets of Israel, who prophesied in those days for many years that I would bring you against them? Gog, aren't you the one that I predicted? I said you were coming. I warned them. Jeremiah said all along, Babylon's coming, Babylon's coming, Babylon's outside, Babylon is here, we're all going to die. That's like I told you all along. And so here's God saying, Gog, you're the one I predicted, right? I told everybody you'd be coming. And in verse 18, and it will come about on that day when Gog comes against the land of Israel, declares the Lord God, that my fury will mount up in my anger, and in my zeal and in my blazing wrath I declare that on that day there will surely be a great earthquake in the land of Israel. The fish of the sea, the birds of the heavens, beasts of the fields, verse 20, all the creeping things that creep on the earth, all the men who are on the face of the earth will shake at my presence. The mountains also will be thrown down. The steep pathways will collapse. Every wall will fall to the ground, and I shall call for a sword against him on all my mountains, declares the Lord God. Every man's sword will be against his brother. And with pestilence, verse 22, and with blood I'll enter into judgment with him. I'll rain on him and on his troops and on the many peoples who are with him a torrential rain, hailstones, fire, and brimstone. I shall magnify myself, sanctify myself, and make myself known in the sight of many nations, and they will know that I am the Lord. And this is the language of like worldwide catastrophe is used a lot in the prophets. Like this is language that Isaiah used it, Jeremiah used it. This is the language of catastrophe. And does God use like this like global catastrophism, I think is the technical term for it. Does God use this language of global catastrophism to describe like literal earthquakes and mountains falling? Or does he use this language to describe the end of things? See, and we got to be careful here. The language of global catastrophism in Hebrew poetry is not used to describe like literal things. Mountains literally melting. Brimstone literally falling from the sky. God uses this language to describe not the literal world being destroyed, but your world being destroyed. That's what he means by it. It's the same language in Matthew chapter 24 of the destruction of Jerusalem. The sun will be darkened and the moon will be blood red, and it's the language. The stars will fall from the sky. He's not saying that stars will literally fall from the sky and the moon will be darkened and the sun will be darkened. He's using this poetic language to say your world, everything you know, everything you're safe in, everything you're secure in, the world that you're living in, is about to end. Everything you know is going to get turned upside down, topsy-turvy, crushed, destroyed. Your world is ending. So here he is saying the same thing to Gog. Gog, you overconfident, arrogant person. Gog who was undefeated in battle. Gog who never made any mistakes. Gog, Nebuchadnezzar, who listened to all the language of his followers, of his people, of his advisors, as I told him he was the greatest thing since sliced bread. Gog, your whole world's going to come crashing down. Now, that happened literally to Nebuchadnezzar in one sense. What was maybe the most memorable, traumatizing event of Nebuchadnezzar's life that's recorded in the book of Daniel? What happened to Nebuchadnezzar where he learned humility? Lost his mind and thought he was a cow. And we don't really know the amount of time. The time description is something we don't really have a frame of reference for it. So whether it was days or months or years, we're not entirely sure. But lost his mind and thought he was a cow. And he went about naked, eating grass, and the dew collected on his body. And then he got his mind back and he went, God is God and I am not. Essentially, my own words. But more broadly speaking, not just not just Nebuchadnezzar personally, but again, after Nebuchadnezzar dies and leaves everything behind, to his son who inherits it all, it just all falls apart. The Babylonian world fell apart. The Babylonian way of life, the Babylonian government, the Babylonian political system, it all collapsed. It caved in on itself and was replaced very quickly by Cyrus and the Persians and the Medes. So I always just caution, whenever you're reading apocalyptic literature like the book of Revelation, like Ezekiel, like some of the prophecies of Isaiah or Jeremiah, be really careful not to be so quick to make it literal. We want to make everything literal. We want to say mountains melting and stars falling and everything. We're so quick to make everything literal, and we forget that this was how the Hebrews communicated in their poetry. This was typical Hebrew poetic license, okay? Poetic license being the operative word there. And so this is very typical of when there is upheaval politically, it is poetically spoken by God as mountains melting and cities falling and sky falling. And don't we do the same thing? Don't we actually use that phrase in our own vernacular? When we talk about the sky is falling, do we literally mean the sky is falling, or do we mean that things are being thrown into chaos by that? I mean, so even we, in our own language, we even have our own poetic license that we employ to talk about chaos and upheaval in a business or a political system. All right, thoughts. Throw anything else in there. I guess we should ask, what's the point? Who's supposed to learn something from this? If you're Israel, now, in all likelihood, is Nebuchadnezzar is he reading this? Is he hey, what's the latest from Ezekiel by the river Chebar? You got any news from Chebar? No, Nebuchadnezzar doesn't care about Ezekiel. He doesn't care. He doesn't care what Ezekiel has to say. So is Nebuchadnezzar reading this? No, he's not reading this. Israel is reading this. So what's the point? Mark, you want to throw something in there? What's that? Nebuchadnezzar's probably still alive at this point. Yeah, he's probably still alive. But you'd have to be smarter than me to line up exactly where the chronology is. You're given this very basic chronology on page 98 of Ezekiel's life, and not a lot of detail there. And so where Ezekiel lines up with Daniel is not, I at least am not expert enough to know exactly where the lineup points are with the book of Daniel and the exact chronology, because in Ezekiel 38, are we even given a timestamp in this chapter? No. My assumption, though, is, this is before returning, so we're somewhere in the middle of the 70-year captivity. We are still in Babylon. Nebuchadnezzar is still in charge. He's still in control. So that's kind of where we're at here. But where exactly and where that lines up with Daniel? Has Daniel risen to second in command of the empire yet? Has Daniel ingratiated himself with Nebuchadnezzar yet? Has Daniel been thrown in the lion's den? I don't know exactly where Ezekiel 38 fits in that chronology. So that's why I try not to get too specific about that or worry about it. So if you're Israel and you're reading this, you're Israel, you're at the river Chebar, you're hearing Ezekiel preaching this, right? He's out publicly preaching this message. He said, let me tell you a story, fellow Israel. Let me tell you a story. God said to me to speak to Gog of the land of Magog, of Tubal and Meshach. And they're like, whoa, boy, I haven't heard those terms in a long time. Didn't we read about that in Genesis a while ago? Boy, I haven't heard about those people in a long time. Well, Gog was going along with his fancy army. Beautiful army. Allies from all over the world. And he defeats everything. And he saw Israel. And he defeated Israel as well. Israel was fat and happy and comfortable. And everyone's going yeah, that was us. Yep, I was there. I was there when Gog came and defeated Israel. You're Israel. What's the point of this story? What are you learning here? You better follow God. Because ultimately, Gog has the best army in the world. Gog's got all the armor and the swords and the chariots and the horsemen. And he's got allies from all the way from and if you look at where these places were on a modern map, he has allies all the way from the African interior all the way up to modern day Turkey. But you know who can beat him in battle? God. God looks down at the army with all their armor and chariots and says, let's throw some hailstones down on there, see what happens. You still got the brimstone? Bring up a box of brimstone. Let's throw some brimstone down there. I'm going to melt mountains. I can melt mountains with my nostril breath. He's melting mountains with his breath. He's knocking fortified cities over, just flicking them down. You better be on God's side. Because Gog may be very impressive, just as Nebuchadnezzar was, but in a moment, God can say, Nebuchadnezzar, you need to learn a little humility. You're going to be, let's go with cow. You're going to be a cow. Go be a cow for a while. You better be on God's side. That's a great lesson right there is, you better be on God's side, because I don't care how impressive Gog of Magog is, he is not more impressive than God, and he's not more powerful than God. Be on God's side. And there's also, what else? Because I've got a couple things I'll throw in there. What else does Israel learn? How does this reassure Israel hearing this message? Yeah, go ahead, Linda. Great, yeah, that's great. The reassurance is they'll know I'm God. And it goes back to chapter 36. Remember how God kept saying in chapter 36, I'll vindicate my name, my holy name, and I'll show myself holy when I vindicate my holy name through them. This is God's way of showing, you guys had doubts, you guys lacked faith, you guys went your own way. You wanted to put trust in Babylon. Well, I'll magnify my name, and you're not going to like it. And sometimes the way that God has to magnify his name is through unpleasant things. And it's the same way, and I'm always cautious. We got to be careful about our metaphors and analogies, because whenever we make a human analogy about God, it always breaks down. It is limited, okay? There's no one-to-one translation from human things to God things. But insofar as it's appropriate to talk about God as a father and me as a father, sometimes when you want your kids to respect you, sometimes do you have to lay down the law? Yeah. Now, there's other ways that you earn your kids' respect, right? You earn your kids' respect also through your mercy and your patience, right? My kids respect me not just because I beat up on them or something. No, my kids respect me because of the times that I show them mercy and I listen. But there are other times, and it's where it's appropriate, right? From time to time, in my wisdom as a father, there are times that to ensure that they know that I'm still dad, that I am their father, and they need to respect me, you've got to lay the law down. And I think that's kind of what's going on here is, I will magnify my name. And if it takes defeating the most powerful empire that the world has ever seen, if that's what I have to do to magnify my name, then just name the empire, and I'll be there. And I will humble that empire. If that's what it takes to magnify my name, I will destroy cities. I will melt mountains. I will rain fire and brimstone down so that they know, if that's what it takes, so that they know that I am Yahweh. It's like, that's chilling, isn't it? That's really chilling. And it's like wild to think about. We don't know the working of God, right? God works in these amazing, mysterious, providential ways. His hand has been in history, and we don't know all of the ways that God's hand has been in history. But just to think about the idea that empires rise and fall, and the lesson we learn is God's name is magnified. That empire rose and fall, and we need to know that God's name is magnified. That God is God, he is Lord, he is Yahweh. the great I am. Great comment. I like that, Linda. That's really cool. That's really cool. And it's also reassuring to the Israelites to know that God is in control. You know, when you're right in the middle of something unpleasant, you're in 70 years of captivity, 70 years away from home, 70 years at the river Chebar. And when you're just right in the middle of it, oh man, it's just drudgery. Just drudgery. It's nice to have some reassurance. It's like when you're in the waiting room at the doctor's office and it's been like an hour and a half and you've read all the magazines and your phone battery died and you're like, ugh. Isn't it nice to have some, you know, the doctor pops his head out and says, I'm really sorry about the long wait. I promise it'll be about 15 more minutes. Does that kind of reinvigorate you a little bit? Like, okay, I can do 15 minutes. I was about to get up and leave and lose faith, but I think I can do 15 minutes. And that's, I think, what God is doing here is like, you're in the middle of this captivity. It's 70 years. Some of you are not going to live through this. Some of you were old men when you got taken from Jerusalem, and you're never going to see the day. You're never going to see the day that you get to go home. You will never see the temple built. You will never see Jerusalem restored. I just want you to know, if you're losing heart and losing faith, I'm still God and I'm still in charge. And Babylon thinks they're all that. I can knock them over with my breath. So just stick with me, people. Stick with me, Israel. Endure it for a little while longer. I've got it. So it's very reassuring. And I think it's a really, really powerful message that he's offering. And here's the thing. Let's be clear. If this is all just premillennialism and this is talking about World War III sometime in our future, you lose all of that. Like that, the actual message that Ezekiel, the real man Ezekiel, the prisoner or the captive Ezekiel at the river Chebar, trying to provide hope and security for people who've lost everything. Like, if this is just Ezekiel going out like, just so everyone knows, in like 3,000 years, World War III is going to happen. Just wanted y'all to know that. I'll be over here. It's like the actual point behind Ezekiel's message gets totally lost if this is all just premillennial like jargon. And I think that people who are like really, really deeply, you know, the televangelist, the evangelical pastor, the I'm going to buy all the books. I'm going to buy all the rapture books. You know, they got the whole bookshelf of rapture books. Like the people who are like, I'm watching the news because Israel alert. You know, the person who is so deep into premillennialism that all they see is premillennialism in the Bible, they don't see the actual message. Like they don't see like, well, that's not what Ezekiel is about. That's not comforting. That's not the message. That's not Ezekiel's purpose. Like I think you lose Revelation. And the beauty of the book of Revelation gets lost in premillennialism. And the beauty of Ezekiel, and the beauty of Daniel, and the beauty of Jeremiah. All of it gets lost because of the noise, the clanging cymbal of premillennialism and all of its dispensational theories. And when you kind of look at it like through the lens of, well, let's just be an Israelite at the river Chebar now. This for a little while, put your Israelite sandals on and listen to Ezekiel preaching this message and you go, oh, that's what Ezekiel is all about. Well, that's not confusing at all. Gog and Magog, that's not confusing. He's talking about Nebuchadnezzar and Babylon, and he's just saying, judgment is coming, you who sit comfortably. Anyone who sits too comfortably for too long and does not bolster faith is going to be Gog and Magog. You, me, Rome, the United States, we all can be Gog, can't we? Gog, that's what makes Gog a symbol. That's what makes Gog a type. Because Gog can be anybody. All right, we're going to go ahead and stop there. I don't want to get into chapter 39 because I like to have a nice clean break at the end of class and not start something that we don't have time to talk about. And bell's going to ring in 30 seconds anyway. So be prepared to work our way. Let's finish up chapter 39. Wednesday's our last class. So I guess if you have anything else you want to say, we covered the temple scene in the last chapters. We did that, a couple months ago. So really, I think we've done a fairly successful job of looking at pretty much everything. Not in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 chapter order, but I've really enjoyed the approach that this writer took to this Bible class material. It has helped me, I think, in my studying of Ezekiel. I think I have a better grasp of the point of this book now after going through it in this way than I think I've ever had before. So, we're going to wrap up with chapter 39, and that should pretty much be it for what we've got to say. But if you have anything else, any final closing thoughts on Ezekiel, just be prepared to just bring it up, and by all means, we'll cover anything that we didn't have a chance to cover if we've got time. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.